Welcome to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. LawyerFair helps businesses find the right lawyer at the fairest price. But on this podcast, we just chew the fat with some great guests.
Now, there's one thing you cannot accuse us of doing at the LawyerFair Business Podcast, and that is not dealing with some fairly meaty topics. And we have got a seriously meaty topic and a seriously wonderful guest. Annette Kramer, welcome to the Daily Business Podcast.
Thank you.
I met Annette a few weeks ago. She is a star in many areas of business, but with 20 years of experience across the world in business development and performance coaching. I thought it would be a good idea to get Annette onto the podcast. Little did I know she was going to throw a curveball at me with the topic of sustainable curiosity. Which is fascinating because actually, as an entrepreneur myself and dealing with a lot of startups, I almost have to clip my curiosity just to get a focus on what I'm doing and what my business is doing. But we're talking here about sustainable curiosity within an organization. So give us a bit more background.
Okay, sustainable curiosity is a term that I coined about 15 years ago when a colleague came to me at PricewaterhouseCoopers and was complaining, asking for advice about some of her thought leadership writers who she felt were not coming up with new kinds of ideas, new ways of looking at things. And because I hate the term thought leadership anyway, because how do you know if you're a thought leader unless people are following you? You can't declare yourself a leader.
Well, you can if you've got one follower.
Well, you can, but I don't think people bother looking behind them to see.
Okay.
Anyway, so what I asked her was, I said, would it be helpful for you if I came up with some language that they would buy into because it's business language and put another spin on it to try to open up some new ways of thinking and new perspectives on what they're doing? And she said that would be terrific. So one of the terms I came up with was sustainable curiosity, because particularly at that time, it was a new concept for big companies, sustainable anything, sustainable, now it's the au courant, but especially in the US at the time, it was a new kind of thing. And so what I said was, why don't you say to them that curiosity, sustainable curiosity, is your greatest resource? And she said, okay, so what does that mean? And I said, well, think about it this way. If you can get in the habit of being curious, just find something to be curious about. It changes the way you look at everything, because as you say, if you're naturally curious, you know this, at one thing it leads to another thing. If you look at something and you say, okay, so how can I be curious about this? What am I curious about? You will find something probably. So she started doing this with her writers, and lo and behold, all of a sudden things started working. The other thing about it was that I said, here's another idea. I said, if it's there's a block, people are very bad at crossing contexts. What they do in life is often very hard for them to reproduce in work, and vice versa, I think. I'm not sure why that is with us, but that's who we are. So I said, well, think about it also like this. If you could help them create a kind of continuous sense of identity and a continuous sense of the way you look at the world from life to work, wouldn't that be helpful too? And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, why don't you ask them to find something that they love, that they're passionate about, that they wonder about, that they're good at outside of work, and do an audit, right? Here we have a language that PwC understands. Do an audit of what it is exactly that drives you to ask questions, what kinds of questions you ask, what are the signals for new perspectives, what is the signal for the next question, for the next, analysis of result, whatever, and then make an audit of that and see if you can apply those things at work, right? So whatever it is that you're curious about, and curious isn't usually what you say about what you're interested in outside of work, it's usually passionate about. But if you find the things that you're curious about outside of work, make an audit, sort of make those questions applicable to what you're doing in an office, and see what happens. And that was also very successful. So these were never official projects for me. The other language I came up with her, I said maybe they're also not too engaged enough. So I came up with a definition for inspiration, which I said, tell them that inspiration is the meeting point of intellectual and emotional insight. And she said, why would I say that? And I said, because if you put it that way, then you open the door to talking about feelings and how you feel about things. And generally, that's not something you talk about in an accounting firm. And then you can start, it just opens the door. So that's, my interest is how do you open the door for new kinds of thinking?
Well, I have to say, this feels remarkably enlightened for the general SME, the general business within the UK. Perhaps the US is, as often it is slightly ahead of us in this. Because I wonder, no, okay. Well, maybe is that
I'm an entrepreneur like you.
Well,
I was an oddball. Listen, when I was working at PwC, people kept coming up to me and saying, why do you work here? What do you do here? I was a very strange bird there. So
I can imagine conversations of curiosity didn't come up very often in many departments at PwC. But just kind of going back a step or two then, the whole concept of kind of embracing curiosity, of companies allowing people to think and to reflect and to come up with crazy ideas. I mean, certainly in the startup world, you can go through to the lean startup methodology if you want to use that as your base. That ability to learn and iterate constantly is obviously a lot easier if you're an entrepreneur or in a very small startup. But how easy or difficult or challenging is it to embed that kind of curiosity within an existing company or within a much larger organization? I mean, are you seeing examples of that more and more in terms of how companies are approaching curiosity?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I don't think things have really changed. I mean, when you talk about business, talking about feeling, how you feel about anything is immediately suspect. Credibility comes from a supposition or a sort of affectation of objectivity. And of course, there's no such thing. So, to me, it's really, I'm glad you asked me about this, because to me, when people look at innovation, like, let's talk about innovation for a second. They tend to look at innovation, which is an output, and they say, how can we be more innovative? Well, what's an innovative thing? What's a road to innovation? You can't look at the output and ask that question, because if you do that, you have to reinvent the wheel every single time you approach it. What you need to look at is the processes that then produce that output that you're looking for. It's not going to be the same output, but again, for businesses generally are a bit risk averse, right? You want to feel as though the time is being used in a particular way. You have boxes to tick. You have, KPIs and all of that, and you want to control this idea of controlling the output. So it's a challenge, I think, for a lot of businesses. But if you start thinking a little bit differently, if you think about people who work for you as learners, rather than thinking about them as employees, all of a sudden, I know it sounds pretentious, but it actually, language matters. So if you think about the people who work for you as a manager, as learners, and that part of your responsibility is to figure out how they're going to learn, right? And their responsibility is how they're going to learn and what they need to learn. All of a sudden, curiosity doesn't seem so out of bounds.
But I know, listen, I buy into all of this completely and utterly, and as I grow and develop my own business, I want to embed this kind of curiosity into it, and I hope that as we get bigger, that will continue. But I mean, I was on a train yesterday. I just wonder how realistic it is for a lot of companies and for a lot of leaders of companies. I was on the train yesterday coming back into London, and there was a small group of 3 or 4 people who were talking about their business and talking about their targets, and there was a lot of stress going on. There was a lot of target-driven, I've got to do this, I've got to achieve that, I've got to make this, if I don't do that, I've got to, you can imagine the scenario and the kind of company that they're working for. Now, in that kind of company, and I'm sure that's representative of many, up against deadlines, up against targets and KPIs, how do you begin to create the space for curiosity? How do you begin to create the space for learning and reflection and for feelings? Most companies are still clearly driven by sales, and importantly so.
Well, it's not, okay, so first of all, this has to be a top-down thing. So if you're saying to me that leaders of a company, like the leader of the company, is thinking entirely in this way, this is not going to happen in this company. That's the way it is. If a manager is thinking that way, or somebody below the leadership, it absolutely has to come from leadership. It has to be part of the brand, the internal brand of the company. And as you probably know, as soon as an internal brand is very strong, it actually bleeds into the external brand, because you've got it shows. Then you attract people who are interested in those things. So it's good for all sorts of reasons to be innovative. And the only way to be innovative is to give space to do it. Now, a lot of companies aren't interested in that. And I don't think honestly, I don't know that every company has to be innovative. I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that everybody, it depends on where you are. Are you going to lose out if you're not being innovative, if you're not creating new things, or not? And if you are, then you just have to figure out, that's why I get, this is where my business comes from, and other people I know who are smart, probably like you, because it's that not invented here thing. They can't do it by themselves. They can't do it internally. So they ask some smart person to come from outside and tell them what they want their people to hear and believe. And so that's one tactic, I guess, of getting it done. But I think that you got to do it little by little, and you can't do it all at once. And, you just have to keep your eye on the ball, like any entrepreneur, right? We're all trying to change something. The world is a very difficult place to change. And we're all doing it little by little.
We are, and I think, and I've been guilty of this in the past. And there's a virtuous circle of taking a step away from what you're expecting to do or what you're planning to do, and taking a step away and taking a bit of reflection. And I think that, interestingly, actually, you mentioned the PwC background. I mean, there's another leading accountancy practice, one of the top 4, who must remain nameless. But I have to say, to their great credit, they have created a kind of a team, a unit. A bit of entrepreneurship, where they've basically said to that team, go and rethink completely how we approach a certain type of market. And I know the guy that's kind of heading up that team, and his partners, his colleagues at the top level, have actually given him complete freedom to address this market, to be curious about this market, to work out how they're going to penetrate and grab market share, and it's working.
I could give, there's I don't know if this is the same one, but I know somebody in EY who has this, and again, I'm not asking you who your people are, but a plug for EY, who I have no relationship with at all, except I know someone who works there. They're doing very similar kinds of things with the tech market, and it's working really well. It's a smart move. But here's the thing, right? Within these large organizations, these projects are very individual driven, right? If it's not the CEO, it's going to be somebody, and I'm not sure who your friend is, but I know that my friend, for example, if she decides to move on, who knows if that project will exist anymore? And this is why it needs to be embedded from leadership, because these projects are great, but they sometimes disappear when the leader of the project goes away.
That's for sure. I mean, KPMG was the outfit that I was mentioning, but I think
might as well give them a plug for being
great. Absolutely. Vivek Sharma, there you go. It's out there. Vivek and his team. Again, we have no commercial association with them at all, but he has been given license to create a very lean startup type culture within his own small enterprise department, and it's really working. And obviously, they've got the clout of a rather large brand behind them. So really, one might say they've got an unfair advantage. But the point of this is a huge company that is actually saying to a particular individual who's clearly talented and able to make things happen, go and do it. You've got license to be curious, you've got license to be innovative, and most people assume those bigger organisations, PLCs, etc., aren't interested or haven't got the ability to do it. But if the leaders and the people at the top think it's possible, then it is possible.
Just like anything in life.
For sure.
Isn't it strange?
It is indeed. It is indeed. Well, listen, and this is a fascinating topic. You've already told me that I haven't given you enough time to drill into it, and you're absolutely right, because I launched this daily podcast series without realising actually I had to do them every day, which is proving to be quite a challenge. So therefore, we have to clip the time on them. But I'm really appreciative of. Now, Annette, if people want to find out more about this, find out more about you, maybe get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Okay, I have a terrible website, but you can go to my website for contact information, and it's www.annettekramer.co.uk, and my email is annette@annettekramer.co.uk.
Well, we are going to include both those things at the foot of this podcast.
There are testimonials that you might want to be looking at if you're interested in talking to me before you talk to me. Make sure that I'm not. That I'm the person you want to talk to.
Well, not sadly, joyously, I am one of those people that gave a testimony. So if anybody looks, and ignore that one, but look at the other 47 or however many there are on Annette's LinkedIn profile. But look, it really
I'm a fan of yours as well, by the way.
Well, it's a little bit of a love-in. If anybody else is listening, just turn the podcast off now. Annette, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. So that was the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. We've got another one tomorrow, I believe. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the LawyerFair.co.uk Daily Podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, why not subscribe and download each episode via iTunes or visit us on the LawyerFair.co.uk website.